Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, and we're going to be taking a look at the year-to-date return on investment, or ROI. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Again, I will be putting out fewer videos this week. I am heading to Miami for Bitcoin Miami in just a couple of days. And if you are going on the last day of the conference, so the 20th, I will have a spot to meet people. So I'll put more information about that out as we get closer to the time and as that is cemented. But I do want to talk a little bit about just the year-to-date ROI on Bitcoin. We do have a new development that occurred recently, and anytime we have a new development, it's always worthwhile to provide an update on where we are. So of course, when you look at it like this, it doesn't really mean a whole lot of doesn't really mean anything. But if we take a look at 2023, so this is what the year-to-date ROI of Bitcoin looks like in 2023. And when you think about that, I think it's worthwhile to consider, well, what does it look like in the last two pre-halving years? You have 2015, and you also have 2019. Now, so far, we've been following 2019 a lot more closely than 2015. Although we could point out now that the year-to-date ROI for 2019 has now surpassed, as a function of time, what we've been able to accomplish in 2023. I've said before that the pre-halving years are generally half up and half down, and these sorts of charts sort of help me cement why I think that. You can generally see that the pre-halving years don't really accomplish a whole lot, not in terms of getting to new highs. We tend to see apathy set in the most during the pre-halving years, and then everything sort of returns back in the halving year. But so far, Bitcoin's actually been doing pretty well this year, right? I mean, it has though fallen below where we were at this point in 2019 when you just look at a year-to-date return. With that said, it's still well above where it was back in 2015 at the same time. Okay. And one of the things that we've previously done is we've taken an average of 2015 and 2019. And the reason we did that is because if you say take an average of 2014 and 2018, and then this is what the average of those 2 years looks like, and then you overlay what happened in 2022, it was a pretty good match as to what ultimately happened. And it more or less it showed you what the bounds theoretically were for Bitcoin during that year. I would argue that you could do something similar for the pre-halving year and say, well, let's just average out 2015 and 2019. And if you do that, this is what you get, right? So this is not 2019. This is an average of 2015 and 2019. If you look at just 2019, it looks like this. But if you average the last two pre-halving years, you get something that's, of course, a more tempered version of 2019, because 2019 we saw a pretty explosive move that we've now fallen behind when comparing to 2023. Now, if you overlay 2023 onto this chart, this is what it looks like, right? And so far, I would argue that an average of 2015 and 2019 has provided a somewhat decent bounds on the Bitcoin price action for this year. If you go back, a few months ago, I said that I think that the average price of time averaged ROI from 2015 and 2019 should provide the bounds of Bitcoin in 2023. Now, of course, it remains to be seen if that's true. We still have 7 months or so before we'll know if that was an accurate statement or not. So far, it has been an accurate statement. But we still have a long time to go. And if you're curious what those bounds are, in order to stay within the time averaged ROI of 2015 and 2019, it's essentially $12,000 up to $35,000. And the way you get those numbers is if you just look here at the lowest point, it was around 25% below the yearly open. And so 25% below the 2023 yearly open is around 12K. But we can also see it went as high as 2.1x above the yearly open, which would put the price of Bitcoin closer to around 35K. Now, I'm not suggesting that the price of Bitcoin has to go to either of these extremes. I'm just suggesting that the price action will likely be contained within these extremes for the duration of this year. And rather than go to new highs, we will likely just be within these bounds. And then next year could be a year where we actually have a reasonable chance to get closer to some of those higher levels. And then 2025, of course. But so far, you can see that we've had this first move up, we had a second move up, and now we've consolidated for a while. If there is a third move, right? If there is a third move, then this chart would suggest that 35K level would be a pretty difficult level to get past. And again, if we end up going into a recession in, say, like the second half of the year, then you would be looking toward those lower bounds. But one of the things we also remember, though, from the last cycle is that the recession that came after the inverted yield curve didn't actually occur until the halving year, right? So if you were to go take a look at the ROI in 2020, of course, it was a great year, but we rallied first in the halving year, and then we saw a pretty big drop that happened back in March. And this doesn't even do it justice because this doesn't include the hourly wicks. We actually went quite a bit lower when you look at this chart on hourly wicks. So again, at some point, I would say between now and the next halving, we will likely see some type of resolution to the inverted yield curve, and that will be sort of the secondary scare for Bitcoin. In the short term, of course, until we see a material rise in the unemployment rate, right? Until we see something like that, you aren't likely going to see a massive capitulation by Bitcoin. But once that actually materializes, which I think you could see during the second half of the year or early next year, then that is what I think would really bring about the sort of that secondary scare for Bitcoin that we've historically seen. We got it in, again, we got it in 2020. So this was the secondary scare after the 2019 move, right? Or sorry, the 2018. So you had 2018, which gave you this capitulation, and then the 2020 move, there was this scare right here. If you go back to the pre-halving year of 2015, we had sort of two scares in the same year. We had this one here in January, and then we had another one in August. Now, the one in August might not look so bad, but actually, if you include hourly wicks, it was essentially a double bottom. And on some exchanges, we put in a lower low. Some it was a higher low. If you average it out, it's more or less a double bottom. And so this is, again, something that I think we'll have to contend with. So I'm guessing that sometime between Q3 of this year and Q1 of next year, we will see that secondary scare that we've historically seen with Bitcoin before we get out into sort of the next phase of expansion by Bitcoin that we've historically seen. It's very cyclical behavior. Of course, these things don't have to repeat themselves forever. I know some people are suggesting that it won't, but until it's broken, I will assume that we will more or less play out in a similar manner. So again, 2023, this is what it looks like. 2019, that's where we are compared to 2019, and then 2015. You can see we were actually much lower down during most of the pre-halving year, and we only actually started to rally out of the third quarter of the year. So again, you're likely going to see fairly tempered price action this year. It doesn't mean you're not going to get rallies. It doesn't mean you're not going to see moves back to the downside, but I would not expect rallies to new highs this year. I certainly wouldn't expect Bitcoin at 50K or anything like that. I would expect a fairly dull year. With some, yes, we've of course had some price movement to the upside like we typically get during the pre-halving years, but we'll also likely have a very similar amount of time where Bitcoin goes to the downside as well, about half green, half red, and then we'll go out into the halving year, and then we'll try to gear up for that. Anyways, if you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and again, check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.